What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Long Box Sessions. I'm your host, Alex Dandino.
And I'm Josh Griffey.
As always, catch us on all your socials. You all know the spiel. Welcome to the new episode, the new stuff. We're so glad to see you. So much has happened. Let's get right into it. Griffey, did you see Joker?
I heard there is a thing called Joker that people were super excited about. Yeah, I saw it. It was cool.
No. It has 11 nominations. It's going to be the big superhero movie that, or comic book movie that breaks the. It's going to make it through. It's going to be the whole thing. It's going to happen this time, guys.
Yeah, what is the most nominated movie of all time? Do you know off the top of your head? Because this one has, 11? It's like Return of the King level?
Off the top of my head, I thought that was Titanic.
Oh, that makes sense. Titanic. I'm going to Google it real quick.
Right? I think it's Titanic. But, 11 is a lot. And a lot of people are...
11 is a fucking ton, dude.
11's like, how many? I mean, there's only like what, 25 categories, something like that? It's not that much. Like, there's categories they don't even show on TV anymore. But outrage in some circles for this movie getting as much press and play as it did.
Okay, so here we go. Ben-Hur had 80% of available categories at 12 of 15.
Ben-Hur.
Titanic had 17.
Got it.
Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, 14. Okay. So it's not it's not unprecedented.
No. But for a comic book movie, it's very unprecedented. I mean, last year, Black Panther had, 4? Something like that? But in any sense.
Yeah, especially. It's fucking, I mean, this is the thing. I don't know why people always get so mad at the because I want to actually do an Oscar show on Film Alchemist because me and you do this run around every year.
Yeah.
And it just makes me laugh how many people have to take to Twitter to remind us how little the Oscars matter to them, that they need to actually write out a long tweet about. And it's like, obviously they fucking ruffle your, you know what, things that don't matter to me, they never appear on my Twitter feed. So it's, I don't know why people always are so mad. It's like, can we just be happy that someone's going to win a statue? That's how I look at it. I'm like, I'm just stoked someone's going to have the best night of their life, man. Do I think Joker is this groundbreaking fucking piece of cinema? No. Do I think it's insane that Todd Phillips got nominated for Best Director? Yes.
Yes.
But I ask people all the time, go through the categories it was nominated for. Where are you really, really mad about this movie, right?
It's Todd Phillips.
Best Picture, it was going to get nominated, it felt like. You know, Uncut Gems getting snubbed seems to be riling people up, but
yeah, that's upsetting.
Hey, it happens, man. And honestly, Adam Sandler just got spared getting fucking waterboyed in front of the world by Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah. I mean, Joaquin Phoenix will definitely win that Oscar.
If he doesn't win, that feels like it will be the all-time upset.
I mean, to me, another year goes by where Taika Waititi makes a non-Marvel movie, and everyone's like, nah, we're good. No Best Director for you.
It got Best Picture.
But why not Best Director then?
It is the weird thing where how can it be the best of all these things and just not directed? How can it be the
Best Picture but not well directed?
That doesn't make any sense. That's what we talk about on Film Alchemist, man. It's a hodgepodge sometimes, because I would argue Joker could be up for Best Picture purely based on the power of Joaquin Phoenix and with little to no help from Todd Phillips and what he was doing in the background.
I mean, again, that's why we have Film Alchemist to talk about those kinds of things. But
nevertheless, I mean, this is the thing. I was pondering this. I was like, has Joker become the new mental disability?
Ooh,
you just take that role as soon as you're like, I gotta get some hardware from my shelves.
You know, it's interesting. I read actually, I was just reading the headline for the article because it was that the Joker's going to go back to theaters, and the headline was Joker's going back to theaters, so prepare accordingly. I'm like, ooh. That reminds me about how awful it was thinking I was going to get shot when I walked into the movie theater the last time I saw it.
I mean, I was in there with the Joker cosplayer. It was intense.
Yeah.
Mostly because he had a bulging Meyer bag, which no one should be carrying ever.
Right.
First off. But,
you mean Miger.
Yeah, Magyar if you're in the Midwest. That's Magyars.
Magyars.
But it's, I don't know. I mean, I think, to me, what I would take from it, right? I know people are mad and everyone wants to take their chance to now shit on the Joker. Sure. And it was a whole ordeal outside of the actual film, right? There's a whole other cloud of dust kicked up that we even got caught up in, right?
Yes.
But I would take a second and step back and be like, man, it's fucking cool that another guy's going to win an Oscar for playing the Joker. It's fucking cool that a movie called Joker that takes place in Gotham with Batman, and that kind of stuff is going to be probably a top 5 Vegas odd chance to win the best picture, right? So, and it's another thing about every year I have the Oscar movie I want to win that almost never wins, right? It's my, I call it the wrestler syndrome, where I'm just like, how did that not win? You have your movie and people that weren't nominated, whatever. But if you just focus on who is actually winning stuff, right? A DC comic book movie, after DC has been getting their asses handed to them for a long time, might have a shot at, Hollywood's biggest self-congratulatory prize. And to me, that's not nothing.
It's something. It's nothing to shake a stick at.
Right, and this is where I'm going with this, right? Because I know people say, it's not a real comic book movie. It's not really the Joker. It's not really Gotham. It's not really Fine. Take all of that as you will. It took its source material from a comic book that I've been reading my whole life and did their own version on it, which is comic book readers. We've seen a lot of Jokers over the year that weren't the Joker, right? Or as you would call him. Everyone thinks they can tell you who the real Joker is. He's probably the one character you can't say that about, right? So, whatever shots you want to take at it, fine. A comic book movie. And to me, this is the one that has probably the best shot ever of winning the best picture.
100%.
You just knew last year Black Panther wasn't going to win it.
Right.
You just knew that was not going to happen, right? This movie, fair or foul, did something that really deeply affected a lot of us, good and bad.
Right.
And to me, it's opening the floodgate for taking these comic book properties a little bit out of these combined universe, factory-made, palatable for adult and children, sugar-free snacks. Right. And maybe we're going to get weirder, cooler movies based on these characters. That's a win.
We'll see. As we speak tonight, I actually saw a clip online surface from the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover, where apparently Ezra Miller made his appearance in the Flash. So
in the Arrowverse?
Yes.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, they're going for it.
I was cool, surprised, honestly, because when Joker came out, I remember a lot of people being like, wow, this was an insanely good. I was surprised how many people I know needed to go to Facebook or wherever and write these long, drawn-out pieces of hatred for the Joker. And I was like, guys, come on. And a lot of those people I know liked Ant-Man and the Wasp and things of that ilk. So, take it for what it is. The Joker tried something, and it might cash in big.
Yeah,
and what that tells the studios is you don't have to play it as safe, right? We can start making. There doesn't have to be a comic book movie. There can be a lot of different kinds of people let into that Big Tent, man. That's what I'm fucking hoping for.
Couldn't agree more.
Also, if Jojo Rabbit doesn't win, we riot. No, I'm just kidding.
I know, right? Actually, there's something you said that I want to come back to, because it's actually the topic I had in mind to talk about today, which was you said, like, this book I've been reading my whole life. Yeah. And I was thinking about this the other day, and I realized Batman I've been reading Batman my entire life, and I've been reading certain books my entire childhood up through adulthood, and I realized, though, how little I have in common with Batman. Like, I'm not a billionaire.
White. That's the list. White.
Yeah, white. Like,
Whiteness.
Those are the only things that I have really
white
in common with
urbanite.
Batman.
That's your two things.
Yeah, white, and I grew up in the city once or twice. Like, but that's it. Like, I don't have anything else. Like, but that's the real question, though. And I was asking myself that this week, and I texted it to you because I was trying to come up with themes, so, like, stuff to talk about for the show, and I realized, like, why am I some sort of loyalist to Batman? What makes you a loyalist to a certain character? Like, what about your personal history? What about the things that you went through as a kid, or the thing you might have gone through as anything? What makes you a loyalist to that superhero? Like, your ride or die. Like, I could say Batman and probably Spider-Man are the two that I tended to gravitate towards the most when I was younger. Now I'm probably still Batman, but that's mainly out of loyalty almost. So
really, okay.
I don't know. It's kind of fascinating.
So the frame you want to have for this discussion is, why do we keep coming back?
well, why are they the ride or dies? Why are those the ones that I go? Because really, when you think
think
about
about
it,
how many issues of Batman comics there are, period, let alone how many you've read.
Well, and I would go even further than that. Like, think about all the iterations of Batman we've read. Like, all the different versions. Like, you and I both have our own separate favorite books about Batman, but it's because they're written a certain way and they're framed in a certain context that we relate to or we gravitate towards. So my thought is, are we actually loyalists to the character? Or are we loyalists to our own interpretation? Like, that's kind of the thing I'm curious about. Like, for instance, I love The Long Halloween. I feel like the earlier version of Batman that Jeff Loeb presents to me is such a great version of Batman because he fucks up. Like, he does fail. He essentially fails in The Long Halloween.
I think they all fail a lot, right? I think what you have to ask yourself when looking at this question, right?
Right.
How much of it, and we live in the era now of nostalgia water torture almost, right?
Oh, totally.
And so it's, how much of it is just, this is the thing that was your safe place at the time when you most were afraid of the world. And so now as adults, you're like, man, the world's still scary. And you come back to that. Versus, and the way I would frame it too is I'm not a loyalist per se. But
sure.
I think it's so weird because I don't know any other medium where this is true other than comics per se. Because even Star Wars, which I love, right? And people lie about this shit all the time, right? Like, I have seen Star Wars 500 times. You haven't. You have not.
Right.
You have not watched one movie 500 times in your life, most likely. If you have, I hope it's because you're strapped up in a padded room somewhere and that's all you can see through the bars.
Unless it's
that's nonsense talk, right? So, but I have read over 500 issues of Batman, right? Like, I probably spent that much time reading, watching Batman combined and all those things, right? And so what I think it is, what locks us into these, because I'm not necessarily a nostalgia person per se.
Sure.
But I have a couple heroes that I still check in with, right? I have my ones that I picked up when I was a kid, right? Your Batman, Supermans. I still remember the very first issue of Batman that I read. Right. I remember the very first Joker issue I read. So it was the same issue. The one where he sets the elaborate trap where Batman's hung upside down in a shark tank and they just had this I think it was Neil Adams drew it. And you're just like, what the fuck is this? It like blew my mind. Right. And then I went home and discovered Adam West on TV, and I was like, oh my God, Batman's on TV. And then not long after that, animated series came out, and you're like, all right, it's baked in my mind forever. The Michael Keaton summer, we all remember these things, right?
Right.
So, but what I think about when I'm like, why am I still reading Batman after all these years, is because, and I take umbrage a little bit with what you said, right? There is more that you relate to with Batman than being a white urbanite. Right?
I guess.
Have you lost? Yes, we've all lost a lot in our lives, right?
Sure. Like,
maybe
I'm not saying
as cinematically
as
he had, but no. This gets to my point though, right? Have we all wanted to do better, but done it in the wrong way? Now you're a dad, right? So his relationship with Robin is even crystallized even more as a fucking horror movie to you. And I think what I do is Batman was baked in at a young age, is a place where I could go and see the big thoughts in my mind reflected back to me in the most interesting way. So it's what you're doing there is
what kind of big thoughts you mean?
But you're jousting with the biggest questions of life, right? This is basic good and evil, right? Where do you draw the line when chasing down a bad guy, right? That's a big question that even as adults we still wrestle with, right? Death penalty, no death penalty, life sentences, all this shit, right? As a little kid on a playground, right? You're faced with a situation. You can look back and be, all right, well, Batman would do this, right? So I think Batman has become a place for me of refuge, even though it's the worst, scariest place in all of comic books to live is Gotham City. And be attacked by this fucking semi-serial killer Batman. What it is, it's a place to go and see that reflected, right? Like I was telling you, I've been having like a really rough couple of days with my job and this and that. That's reflected back to me when I read Batman, right? It's not as interesting for me to think about my shitty, boring job and whatever.
Right.
Or the tumult of, trying to do whatever I'm doing. But if I see it in Batman, right, like him really struggling with the fact that he can't crack a case, there are so many but perfectly transparently relatable reflectors back to me. So in a way, it becomes therapeutic.
Right. But wouldn't you almost have that? But in that sense, the therapy is almost nostalgia in some ways.
No, see, I don't think so, because I get what you're saying is why couldn't I go watch, like, The Witcher and see
No,
that, right?
that's not what I'm getting at all. Actually, like Batman's a refuge, absolutely. Like,
Right.
Look, you and I have talked a lot about this. Like, everyone can read comic books. Comics are for everyone.
Right.
That's a staple on this show. But the reason we go to those comics is because of what exactly you're talking about. Like, it makes us feel better to lose ourselves in this little world that we've created. But that not we've created, but that we've invested so much time in. Like, it feels. I'm not sure the right word. I mean, it feels like home. Like, I don't feel as scared to read a book.
I think that's important, but I don't lump nostalgia. To me is I'm looking for the exact same hit. Right?
Right, I agree.
And
like, I would never want to read something. I don't get
that with Batman. The way you said it is Gotham is a home away from home for me, right? But I do think it is important that I found Batman young,
right?
Because I've grown up with Bruce Wayne, right? It's like the old joke for those of us who are our age. It's like we all were, in middle school, or I was actually elementary school when South Park came out,
right?
And you watched it from the kids, and then you hit the point where now you're like more stoked on Randy Marsh. Right. I grew up in South Park. That's another of my home away from homes. And with Batman, I think it's fun to go from he is a good guy chasing down bad guys. And as you get older, you start to see the bad and good in every character, right?
Right.
Even the Joker, you see the way that his trauma and his psychological burdens are fucking triggered and exacerbated by Batman's existence, right? Right. And so I think that growing up with and having seen it from both sides, because there are heroes now that I would consider myself, to use your phrase, ride or die with, but I don't have a childhood lens from them, right?
Right.
Like that's what I'm probably saying, the closest I have is Howard the Duck, but my childhood lens was him in a movie where he was a jizz mopper.
Right.
Right? And now as an adult, you're like, I see him as an adult, and it makes perfect sense. Right? But Batman I've had as a kid on.
But I guess the other thing, too, though, is I wouldn't necessarily call what I feel about Batman. Like, obviously, there are more things in common with Batman. Like, yes, you're right. But for the purpose of this argument, the purpose of beginning this, it seems the gap seems quite wide. But I feel like what I like about Batman and what I feel about Batman is not about nostalgia ever.
Right.
Like you were saying, the important thing about rereading books, and this is something that I always really love about like going to my library and picking up a book I've already read, is that I always unlock something new that I didn't think that I had not seen before. Like, I'm always reading from a different perspective. Like, I've gone back and read a lot of Batman books since the kid was born, and like, you're right, my perspective has completely changed on like what I actually think. Like, so many.
Why am I thinking of Child Protective Services the whole time I'm reading this Batman book?
But even more than Batman, like, so many books that I've reread have changed simply because I'm a father now, and the context is so completely different. Like, one of our listeners, actually, Dwayne Madison, because I asked on our Facebook group, like, "Hey, what are some of your ride or dies? Like, what's the one that like you always hung in?" And he mentioned Bruce Banner. And I thought that was really interesting because
that's a great one.
That's a great one. Like, Bruce Banner is a great example of something that's been completely recontextualized now that I'm a father, because Bruce Banner's dad was such a huge piece of shit. Yeah. And it's interesting because especially now in the Immortal Hulk run, it's such a large portion of how Bruce operates in the shadows, as it were, now in the book. Like, it's such a looming presence in the back of his mind, like this terrifying specter of all the time. Yeah. But again, that's another way that Bruce Banner, while he might not be one of like my all-timers, he's definitely been recontextualized over and over again as I've grown up. But that's what I think is important, is it's not nostalgia that pushes it forward.
Here's where I think the Bruce Wayne the Banner parallel is interesting, right? Because I think the characters that stick with us the most have empty space for us, right? Because we talk about it too. It's one of the best things about comics is how much work you have to do as a reader that you don't realize in the best books, right? They talk about it in, a lot of studies of comics, but that gutter area between frames where we jump geography, distance, tight shot, wide shot, full page, you have to fill in those gaps. Whether you think you're doing it or not, you do.
Right.
And this is why I've always said I like Batman with like the fucking huge billowing cape and the long pointy ear. The more darkness you give me in his figure, it gives my mind work to fucking pack all of the bad stuff in my head in there, right?
Right.
Bruce Banner is much the same. When he turns into the Hulk as a kid, you're like, he's the biggest, strongest monster who smashes. He's my kid's favorite superhero from the time he was 3 on. When we took him to the comic shop the first day, he ran and got that little plushie of Hulk. I still have it to this day. It's a very special toy in our household, right? He liked him because he was the guy who got to do the fucking yucks and smashing on Superhero Squad, I think the show was called, right?
Right.
I still love reading Hulk at this age because, again, I don't ever think of the Hulk as a gamma-created monster, but rather someone's inner trauma is causing them to explode into destructive behavior. Right. And that makes perfect sense to me.
Totally.
And so there are superheroes, right? Like, I remember when the Thor movie was coming out, I was talking with some friends, and they're like, Thor fucking sucks. Thor's always sucked. Why do you like Thor? And I was just like, I'm just a sucker for the kind of high fantasy sci-fi mix. I like the Shakespearean family trauma. But again, I think Thor suffers a bit from this, where he's written almost too specifically at times.
Right.
Where I'm not interjecting my own traumas onto Thor, right? I can sympathize with him and be along for his journey, but it's not the same as a Batman, Bruce Banner, Spider-Man. These are characters that fucking let you force all that shit into the suit, right? Peter Parker's not under the Spider-Man suit. All my fucking young adult inadequacies are. Right. And that's great. And that's what carries it on from the kid you wanted to be. Because we all used to do this at the playground, right? I'm this guy, right? Because you wanted to do like web slinging or whatever the fuck. When you're older, that starts to shift. And I think it's fascinating which of those characters hang with us for long enough.
Totally. And
right?
I think
X-Men are very much like that.
Right. I mean, I think that's what's interesting about Batman, because, like, again, Marvel exists in the real world, so to speak. Like, everything that happens in Marvel happens in New York and so on and so forth. So the thing about Marvel, too, is they all are real people. They live within the world of our own problems. Like, Peter Parker is also worried about making rent. And that's something all of us can relate to.
Getting a girlfriend.
Like, having a girlfriend, like all these kinds of things. Like, that's like the low-hanging fruit. But then, like, you go further, like, the X-Men are obviously worried about getting murdered, prejudice, like all kinds of crazy shit. Like, there's
fucking
things
hate crimes and shit. Yeah.
Yeah, there's things that everyone can relate to. Everyone can grab onto a piece of it. I mean, again, like, I love Bruce Banner as an adult now, because it is like all of my insecurities and all my mental anguish just buried deep down in my belly until, like, someone presses the wrong button and I just, like, erupt.
Yeah. Well, you understand that complete, I've had my limit, and I'm going to have this irrationally destructive phase based on nothing more than I've taken more than I can handle, right? Even if it's not that much. That's the other fucked up thing.
Right.
Yeah, and I mean, just like X-Men, right? As a kid, I read it. I was a, young Midwestern white kid. Not necessarily what that book's talking about all the time, but I remember being bullied, a little bit the outsider, praying for the day my mutant power would manifest so I could save these fucking rubes from themselves, even though they didn't deserve it, right? Like, that was kind of my X-Men fantasy. And then as you get older, you're like, oh, there's a whole other layer going on with these mutants that I think adds this extra. I think that's what I look at it, right? Who are your ride or dies? For me, it's who keeps letting me add layers on to the story. I think that's what matters.
Right, and I'd say that's why it's not nostalgia that pushes this forward for any of us, but much more the ride or die aspect is much more that it grows with you as a person. Like, I become older, but my character changes its viewpoint as well. Like, you mentioned Thor earlier, and I got to tell you, like, I think the post Ragnarok Thor is so fascinating because, like, the micro problems that he has to deal with as like that the JMS run is absolutely beautiful because so much of it is him having to deal with loss, but not only that, having to deal with the burden of that loss and the burden of having to move on and try to find the people that you love amidst the ruins. And, like, I mean, all of us can relate to something like that, like trying to pick up the pieces of your life after they've literally come crashing down around you. Everyone's been there. Everyone feels that. Yeah. So, I mean, again, there's nothing about comics and there's nothing about these characters that aren't relatable and in some way beautiful. The benefit of not having to grasp onto them nostalgically. Like that might be the seed. Maybe that's like the germination point.
Well, I would say there
like,
are too, right? Like
pushing
who's a hero
on,
that's hard to like grow with, right? Ghost Rider.
Right.
I like Ghost Rider visually for what he is. He feels like a very awesome comic book adventure with me. There are not a ton of great books that add much more than that, than just the fun. He is this mercenary from hell, whatever, with a cool power.
Right.
And that's the thing you just said with Thor, I think, is the coolest thing. It only takes one really great book to me. If you find that one really great book, it's like when, fucking Neo finger bangs Agent Smith or whatever, and all of a sudden he's like, now I'm coded, blah, blah, blah. And like essentially Neo fingers the entire Matrix at that point, and the juices are just flowing across the whole system. That's what can happen with a great book, and it is
horrifying.
As I got older, yes. I mean, I just went for it. It was the first analogy. Probably not the best verbiage for what actually happened in that fight scene, but that's fine. But as you get older, right? Like I find myself now, I read more stuff now as I am getting older, right? Like I find myself always reaching for Swamp Thing, Constantine, Silver Surfer, stuff like that as I've gotten older. Even Martian Manhunter, who has a criminal lack of amazing books, right? Right. But I like those kind of heroes at this phase. But it is just different because I don't have the long history. But what I wonder is, when I'm 50, will I look back and be like, oh, fuck, I've been reading Swamp Thing pretty regularly for 30 years.
Right.
So will I just keep adding on these new characters who have been writing in my sidecar for that long? You know? And that's and this is something we confront now. It's like, think of the things that mattered so much when you were a kid, right? Like, Darkwing Duck and shows like this, Looney Tunes, whatever the fuck they are. I show them to my kids now, and it's like, oh, this is just cool because they're watching it like I watched it. Right. I'm not getting a lot of new enjoyment out of that, right? And I think that's the separation for me, right? How do you have these? Hey, here's a great example, right? If you had asked me when I was 14, would you watch 800 episodes of Roseanne over the next 30 years? I would have said, of course, I love the Connors. Like, that's my family. I watch on TV. She lived too long, saw herself become the villain. And now you're like, I'm shockingly less interested in what Roseanne is presenting me. Right? So it happens a long time. And this actually, it's funny too, because this circles back to the Joker thing with me, and I'd love your opinion on this. I read, again, a dear friend of mine I've had a long time, and we never agree on movies or books, but it's fine. But I thought he had truly one of his world-class worst takes in this, when he refuses to accept that this is a version of even the Joker, right? And I think we addressed this in our Joker movie podcast, right? It's not the Joker as we've known him, but he does have the hallmarks and tenets of the Joker. Right? They did a Joker movie without Batman, but it's still the same thing. And he just refuses. He's like, well, why did I waste my time if it's not the Joker? And I was like, it is the Joker, just not as you accept him, right? The same way Cesar Romero is not the Joker, but to a lot of people he is.
Right.
Does he still encapsulate this chaotic madman kind of thing? Yes. And I think Joaquin took it to just a different place, right? This much more personally traumatized victim. And there's all kinds of problems with how Todd Phillips portrayed what was going on. But what Joaquin did is truly, purely a great look at that character. Right. That a lot of fans just refuse to accept as that character.
Right.
And I get the basis of the argument, but I think having sat with it now for months, that pisses me off. Because this is how characters can test their mettle as worthy of being ride or die or being loyal to.
Right.
Can they change, and do they have the room to do something different than we've seen, and it still matter and affect us and expand our knowledge on that character? Right. And I would argue Joker, for all of its foibles, does that part exceptionally well.
Oh, absolutely.
What do you think about when you are, as a loyalist or growing ride or die with a character, what do you think about versions that come out of left field and challenge the way you have been with this character for so long? Does that hurt or help how it works?
Hell no, man. Like, that's the good stuff to me. Like, that's the part where, like, you said it best. Like, that's the whole point of this character moving with you through your life, is that when you read it at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 and on, like, it should always make you feel something different. Otherwise, what's the point of having that character around? Like, I I think about all of the great Elseworld stuff we've gotten to read over the years. You know, like I like. I'm not a huge steampunk guy, but there was a time in my life where I thought that was actually a cool aesthetic. I loved Gotham by Gaslight. You know, life goes on. You move on with your life.
Steampunk Dandino.
Yes, all the googly eyes, all that shit. Like, I thought
that was a rough phase. That was kind of like bucket hat Griffey. That was a real phase.
Right,
I thought that was going to catch on and be really. Sadly, the only entertainment in that genre were like Limp Bizkit and Juggalo.
Yeah. Well,
it was
like,
not
okay.
a strong.
Think about other think about Marvel. Marvel, like, great example. Marvel 1602, which is this Neil Gaiman book that he did. Basically, the Marvel universe gets shifted to like essentially the 1600s, where the New World is being discovered, and it's like absolutely
the house
bizarre.
that Stan built lands on Plymouth Rock.
Like, yeah, and I mean, like, if you read through the whole book, the ending is like absolutely insane because it's like this whole time travel thing. Like, Steve Rogers winds up being a Native American. It's absolutely bizarre. Like, but
the true Captain Native America,
right? Yeah, it's
a cool book,
but it's a really cool book, and it tests all those things we're talking about, which is like, can you believe that they would do something like this? Can you believe that these characters might exist in this way? And can you afford the opportunity to like look at them in a different light and see like, oh, maybe that is a little different. Like, again, like I love the X-Men in this one, like the witch breed thing. That's pretty cool. That's a really interesting way to approach those characters, and an interesting way to change them for the better, so that you get a different lens. You get to see it through a different eyeball entirely. But,
I think that's a harder gimmick to pull off in a way too than something like The Boys or Watchmen, that are just tongue-in-cheek parodies.
Sure.
That they're more like, hey, look at this character that is like the one you know but not the same, so you don't have to grapple with that as much, right?
Right.
Actually doing a book about the X-Men or Spider-Man, Batman, Superman that truly flips it, and not just for gimmick's sakes, right?
Sure.
Like something like Superman Red Sun. It strikes you as just, of course, what an interesting gimmick to set up the book. But in doing it, they actually offer a pretty similar Superman to what we've known. All you have to do is just tilt that lens.
It's a
it's just like how they say, what if the Earth had been turned just a little bit more? That's what that book does, and it's so much more introspective because it's playing it close. And I think you can go both ways, right? Big gimmick can work either or. As long as you're giving me something different.
Right. I mean, I'd say, like, it's interesting, like, in 2020 now, I would say that actually the deconstruction of the superhero genre is the easiest, most low-hanging fruit sort of storytelling you can do in a lot of ways. Because,
also, it's been done to death.
Oh, yeah. It's scorched earth, you know? Like, if you're going to deconstruct superheroes, do it, just, I don't know. I wouldn't probably do it very well. But like,
you're not cynical enough for that.
Right. But in that sense as well, like, as we've been working, like, Griffey has been editing this book that Evan and I are working on. And like, I wouldn't call it necessarily deconstruction at all. I would say, like, if anything, there's a lot of love letters in it. But to me, what I think is the really challenging writing is actually writing characters like Superman in earnest. And like having to continue, like we talked last week about Superman Year One and how Frank Miller's take is just so out of left field and kind of bizarre, but also sort of the proliferation of everything Frank Miller believes in right now, but also essentially, why wouldn't that be the case? Why wouldn't Clark Kent go to the military? Because that's what you do when you're in the middle of the country, you know, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Like, well, that level of patriotism.
Right. They took the hero who has always represented hope and optimism to the point of being like, oh, we tar and feather him as a Boy Scout, right? He's not interesting. And then you give him to this guy who's known for being a cynical deconstructionist of superhero mythology.
Right.
And he does a pretty good job, but there's just that little extra layer of he kind of ripped the guts out of the hope, right?
Right. Well, and I think that's
even that though, right? Rather than reading that book and just being pissed off, Frank Miller doesn't get Superman. Frank Miller gets Superman.
Yeah.
It just doesn't vibe with his worldview. And I think even that, right? Sometimes you put the fly in the ointment and you're like, oh, I don't like that thing as much, but it makes the rest of that ointment look pretty good.
Right. It's the importance of putting the fly in that ointment is that you need that book that you don't like written by that one guy. Like, not just because of your tastes are different, but also because it recontextualizes your character, maybe in a way you didn't expect it to. But you know how you like your character, and that's the really important thing. And that's kind of what I was getting at the beginning, which is I like a certain version of Batman. You like a certain version of Batman. I mean, but what's interesting is like we all kind of know the basics of Spider-Man. I'm not sure there's necessarily a version of Peter Parker or Miles Morales for that matter that all of us will agree is like, oh, that's the worst version. Like, other than probably like the Clone Saga, which no one seemed to enjoy. No,
it's Spider-Man 3, Sam Raimi dancing through the streets. That's the worst version.
Oh, yeah.
The absolute worst version. And I've seen Spider-Man pornography. Believe me, that's the worst version.
True. Well, you see Spider-Man getting his jollies up. I actually, I wanted to. We had a lot of really good responses, by the way, for this. Besides Dwayne's, Mike Templeton said all the Ninja Turtles, which I thought was kind of interesting. Because
that is a fascinating one.
Because nothing has changed more than the Ninja Turtles over the last 40 years, man.
Yeah.
Like that started as a dark Daredevil pastiche and has turned into children's programming.
But then it kept changing back, right? Like we got pretty adult fare. Those 90 movies were pretty dark.
That first one was
my youngest one is obsessed with turtles now.
Wasn't that first one like watching
a lot of this turtle stuff?
The first one reminded me like watching Mud with Matthew McConaughey.
Oh Jesus, yeah, a little bit until they.
But I thought that was a really fascinating one because that is a perfect one to grow with you
because they still have the teenager always in the title, but there are a lot of versions of that where there is very little teenager about them.
There's a lot of adulting. But
like the one my youngest kids like, right, is just an ADD fever dream.
Yeah.
It's like what would happen if you were ODing on Pixie Sticks. That's what you would see before you died, right? Rise of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But it's still pretty cool. Like, even I can watch, like, there's things I like about this.
Yeah, sure.
Right? I think the Turtles are an interesting one because I would be interested to ask him, what are you pouring into Turtles that you see back, right? Because to me, there's always been two conflicts in Turtles, right? Which is Leo versus his duty and maturity fighting against the teenage urge, and Raphael just fully being the teenage id. And other than those two moments, you're like, what is the actual, depth of a Ninja Turtle that I would get now at my age?
Right.
But I think maybe that's the point. Maybe that's the anti-Batman where you just go to throw that shit aside and be like, I just want to watch Turtles do karate. It's kind of, that's the original magic of that image is what a title and what a hilarious image. And they just made this empire. So maybe that, in a way, is another way to be ride or die. If you can just always, this is always a place you can come to laugh in the face of the impending doom, right?
Right. Shane Norton, actually, who I met at I think LA Comic Con a year ago, he said Wolverine.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Wolverine makes sense. I also liked he also explained that it comes from a place of nostalgia. His father-in-law apparently gave him Hulk 80 and 180 and 181.
Right, that's amazing.
That's amazing for one. But
it's so great to hear other comic book people like, what is your moment, right? Like this definitive moment where you just, oh fuck, this is my thing.
Right.
But yeah, Wolverine's a great character who he himself as a character has had to reinvent himself through the ages to where now when we see Wolverine, like something I picked up on Wolverine as I've gotten older is it's shocking to me how much he can care about things.
Right.
Because you're like, at that point in your life, Wolverine to me at this point plays as a Doctor Who parallel. Where it's like the Doctor's like, I'm in my thousands of years old, right? Like 12 to 1,500 years old.
Sure.
Has seen so much loss and misery, but never gives up the fight and optimism. And strangely, as I've gotten older, there's a lot of that in Wolverine.
Right.
Like why he still keeps thinking he can find love or he can still fight with the X-Men to help save anyone, right? Like
right.
Why he still cares about other younger like there's still a lot of hope in him, which I never ascribed to him in the entire time I was younger.
Totally.
And I think that's the kind of stuff that characters have hidden in them that keep that fucking bond growing.
how many times has he been taken out of the X-Men continuity in general and just gotten his own series? Like, I think about Old Man Logan, which was our definitive Wolverine book. Like, I gleaned so much from that and loved so much about that because Wolverine is a character that you can take anywhere and he fits. He does what he does no matter what.
Yeah.
And you'll still be able to glean that piece of iconography from him and recontextualize it for yourself. That's why he's a great character to just always have, you know?
For sure, man.
There's Ben Corbin from our Facebook said The Max, which I thought was utterly fascinating.
As a fellow collector of the Max, I thought that answer was staggering. That's always been one of those books that, like, I still adore when I find Max trades.
Yeah.
Just because that is such a, I don't know, I mean, I'm in danger of sounding Rob Liefeld-like, but that was just an era that was just so titillation to the Max to the eyes, and not just because of the way they draw the Max's companion, but it's just like the muscles and the vibrance and everything's so big, and it's just it's this teenage fever dream, the Max. And that one has these fun extra layers of the Max not really knowing all the time what's going on. I look at that book as like I saw Rob Liefeld was doing the whole, we were texting about it, like, this is a terrible era for comics because all they do is talk. I was like, yeah, God forbid they can get an emotion out past all those fucking pectorals and no feet that Rob Liefeld draws. God forbid we cram some
God
story
forbid we
into
get
these
some
books.
stuff.
Yeah.
My bad. That's me. That one's on us, Rob. Our bad. That's
Rob.
our bad. Sorry, buddy. There was one more besides Howard the Duck, of course. Everyone, by the way, caught on and said Howard the Duck almost immediately.
Yes.
One of our
You
friends,
think that was only to appease me, or do you think I've
I think
found
that,
other people of my feather?
It was only to appease you. 100% only to appease you.
The boxers are learning.
Rick Crowfoot said Spider-Man, which we've talked about, of course. But again, Spider-Man's such a great one because
I bet if you polled people, he's probably easy top 3, right?
Definitely. You know what's interesting too is actually
number 2 behind Batman.
It's interesting we're talking about this because I also realize I've been reading a Spider-Man Life Story by Chip Zdarsky, which is literally Spider-Man aging, which is the first time I've really seen that, like aging actively in a series, and it's very much about this like topic we're talking about, which is like what does Spider-Man mean in the 60s and the 70s and the 80s and the 90s, like up through the ages, like. Does he age well? Does he age himself out? Like, does he still mean something? It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah.
It's a pretty fascinating read. I would.
Well, that was one
of
of the great Into the Spider-Verse tricks is that they gave us a Peter Parker who stealthily became Uncle Ben.
Yeah, totally.
Right? And had like a really sweet Uncle Ben moment with another person that he had inspired in a way. Not him, but the moniker of Spider-Man. It was pretty fascinating.
True. That is exactly why. It's exactly why that movie is so successful, too. It's exactly why that storytelling aspect of the movie itself is so wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the cool thing, though, and that's one of the things I liked about Spider-Verse, is it just kind of broke this mold, and that movie is actually the prime example of what we're talking about. How many people have been with Spider-Man for so long, and that movie just gets that Peter Parker's not the important thing, right? What we put into the suit is what's important. And
100%.
I think that's why Spider-Man is. I mean, I bet you could argue that he's even above Batman as people's ride or dies.
Oh, I think you can make that argument.
I think
easily,
a lot of people like
question.
Batman, and he's more recognizable. But if you're talking about has the most hardcore fans that really are bought into what that character is,
Spider-Man 100%.
Spider-Man could take Batman. It would be a close fight, I bet.
All right, last bit here. I want you to think of yourself at 50, which is in 2 years. And consider...
Did you say in 2 years? Jesus H. I know I don't have a lot to live for, but goddamn, don't take my decades away.
Okay, think about Griff at 50.
Yeah.
The boys are grown. Amy is still being Amy. But consider yourself, what's the character that is transcended for you up to 50 years old?
You know, I think as I get to 50, I think Swamp Thing will still be my guy.
Interesting.
I think there is, because I think at that phase too, I'll be probably, I'll have more of a predilection to imagine what I'll be like once I am absorbed back into the earth. Like, just knowing myself and the way I live my life, like 50 seems pretty goddamn old. I know people are saying it's the new 30s or whatever the fuck because old people have pecs on Instagram. But that'll be a time when I'll be like, I smell something. It might be the grave. And I'll be pondering a lot, about these kind of bigger, what is the whole life cycle thing. I think Swamp Thing and even Batman will progress. But I think what I find fascinating is that at 50, I feel like I'll be reading Batman almost angrily. And looking at the man who has so much ability to actually affect change in his just feudal fucking childish game that has actually ruined a city. Right. I think maybe by 50 I'll be like, damn you, Batman.
Yeah,
I'll be sitting there looking at all my own fucking squandered time, and I'll just see it in Bruce Wayne and be furious.
Well, we'll all just be sitting in our oxygen masks while right after I change my tank.
Have you seen a 50-year-old? They're not that decrepit.
I'm talking about I'm talking about the climate, my friend. None of us are going to be breathing in 20 years.
Oh, you're doing that. I thought you were talking about the climate of today, where we can't say anything.
I mean, if anything, if you're going to be resolute with Swamp Thing, you should know. Come on, bro.
No, because eventually the Green will fucking summon me back to be the righteous warrior to smite all you fucking hogs. I'm going to take back this fucking Earth for those of you who are good to the planet Earth. Oh, my God. If only the Parliament of Green would empower me to smite. I live in the perfect area, too.
Yeah,
everyone whose truck can't fit into a parking spot, right? Truck nuts, that kind of thing. I'd be like, easy first harvest. Just fucking vine them down, dude. Vine them down.
I would invite it.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
What do you think who are you looking forward to growing old with? This is me and my wife's fantasy, right? We always imagine the waking up old, walking out onto the front porch with our rocking chairs and having a coffee.
Right.
And, what does that morning look like? What are we talking about? Actually, our fantasy really just extends to that. We hope that's what our mornings look like every day when we're old.
Right.
Right?
I would agree with that. I would love that. I would love that fantasy. Who
do you want to have that
who's your rocking
with,
chair? Who's your rocking chair character? Man, I agree that I feel like I'll be mad at Batman when I'm older because I'll be like, you piece of shit.
I've already felt the shift in myself, if I'm being honest. Because now I read Batman even as if he's one of his own rogues.
Yeah.
Right? I've already started to make the turn, and I'm imagining, 28 more years to 50. I'm going to be so cynical by then.
Yeah, I feel like the older I get, the more I'll probably feel... It's interesting. I actually never thought about it this way.
Do you see yourself break? I think old people only come in two versions, right? I made it this far. I don't have a long time left. I'm going to be the fun, optimistic old person. Or the everything is doomed. You people behind me ruined it, old person.
No.
Which way do you think you'll break?
I feel like there's a lot of Wolverine. There's a lot of I want to be hopeful. And I feel like there is a lot of hope in Wolverine because he does help people. But that is the character I feel like I will probably feel more in tune with as I'm older. Yeah. Wolverine, I don't know, maybe some version of Spider-Man, but I can't imagine Spider-Man feels like a very youthful character. But again, as I'm reading Life's story, you realize he's just barely hanging on to youth. It's pretty fascinating.
I think even Spider-Man works as a middle-aged hero.
Yeah, totally.
I'm thinking, what is the elderly hero?
Definitely Wolverine. Definitely
even
Wolverine.
At our age now, something I read now is concrete.
Yeah,
because it's just this guy who's oh man, this, alien suit or whatever has encased me, and he's kind of this is my chance to just be he's an early blogger, right? He just wants to write article pieces and shit,
right.
And you're he was the first, kind of YouTube star. Where he's man, life blows, but I got this one shot to kind of remake my life as something. So he's a perfect middle-aged character.
Right. I'd say I'd say the 50-year-old me probably would. It's Wolverine, I think. Middle-aged character, I feel like.
Are you just going to be reading old Archie books?
No. I feel like
old Archies.
I feel like me now, I would actually go with those sex criminals guys because there's a lot of wish fulfillment in there.
Yeah,
I just wanted to have sex in a random place and be like, no one will ever know I did this here. There's a lot of oh yeah, I got away with something because now now I have a kid, I don't get away with anything, so it's more or less the last gasp of youth, I guess. I don't know, man.
Yeah. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. Also, imagine this. What kind of books are they going to be writing for Batman in 50 years? Imagine the fucking seismic shifts that will have happened by then.
It'd be pretty fascinating.
Yeah, man. That'll be crazy.
Griff, is there anything you would recommend to read to our to the boxers?
Actually, I just got it via the mail today. Headlopper Volume 3. The fucking Headlopper. To me, there's actually not a better book going right now. And it's just this really fucking fun, awesome fantasy book.
Headlopper is excellent.
Like, I've never read a page of Headlopper and just not been in childlike ecstasy.
For sure.
You know, it's just literally, you're like, remember how it felt on Christmas morning when you were a kid?
I do.
That's how I feel every page of Headlopper, and it's just fucking delightful. Perfect. And Volume 3 came out of nowhere. I didn't even know, I saw the trade of it, I was like, ordered it immediately. It was fucking fantastic.
Perfect.
Honestly, also after it was out at my local comic shop, so don't give me that bullshit. What do you got, Alex? What are you reading right now?
Oh, man, I picked up November by Matt Fraction and Elsa Chartier.
I haven't even heard of this book. Who's putting it out?
Image is putting it out. It's a crime. It's just a crime thriller. It's a crime thriller told from 3 different perspectives. The first book is out. I think it's 3 different women's perspectives of the same crime. So I'm reading the first book, and I'm very, very. I mean, it's Matt Fraction, so it's hard. Is
this
to
a
put
little
down.
Yojimbo-y? Is that the setup?
It's a little Yojimbo-y.
3 truths, and we have. Is it Rashomon that does the 3 truths?
Little Rashomon-y, but it's cool. I mean, like again,
yeah.
I started it, and it's fascinating. It's wonderful though.
I have a story on the way out that you'll get a kick of.
What do you got?
I have a friend in from out of town, right? So we were like, we'll meet up with all our old college buddies. We got together for some day drinking, and it was raining, right? And I have this massive hair thing going on, so I was just like, had this drenched hair down on my face. I looked just like a fucking caveman. We're out day drinking, talking about old war stories from college, whatever. We walk into this bar, and it's empty except for me and my 3 buddies. There's one table with a guy and these 2 girls, right? All younger. They look like they're actually in their 20s and should be there drinking. And as we walk by, they turn around and see me, and I was just like, here we go. Like, what are they going to say? I was expecting trouble. And the guy's face lit up when he saw me. And he goes, oh, this guy's seen The Witcher. And I go, what the fuck does that mean? And he's like, you look like the kind of guy that binge watched The Witcher. And I was like, I actually haven't seen an episode, but I think that's cool.
I gotta tell you, I absolutely love the idea though of this guy trying to impress these women by talking about The Witcher and be like, finally, a guy's here to talk about The Witcher.
Well, I was also looking at him, and I was like, man, if you would found me like 10 years ago, I could have helped you seal the deal. Calling me over now, sorry, dude, you're not getting laid. Bad strap. But I fucking died laughing. I was like, what do I look like right now? Like, what is actually led me to this thought experiment, right? About everyone I met the rest of the night. It's like, what do they think I just watched?
Oh my God.
What did they assume I was just binge watching?
I love it. All right, guys. Headlopper Volume 3, November, which is out now. Volume 1's out right now. Volume 2, I think, comes shortly here. But we hope you're having a wonderful week. We hope that we've brought some brightness to your day. Tell us, who are your ride or dies? Do you think when you're 50, you'll also feel the same way about that character? We want to know. As always, catch us on all the socials. We're very active on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. Also, check out our other show, The Film Alchemist Pod. We're shaking bacon all week, man. Oh,
Kevin
my
Bacon.
God.
Yeah.
All month was shaking bacon. We watched Flatliners, which was amazing. Right. And then Footloose and Cop Car coming at you soon. Yeah. I'm very excited to end the month on a high note. I love Cop Car personally.
That's right.
So,
I've been trying to figure out a Kevin Bacon TikTok all week. So stay tuned for that. Joshua Griffey 24. I'm going to figure out the ultimate Kevin Bacon TikTok.
Oh, my God. Yeah, I'm not cool enough to do TikTok yet. But, guys, thank you as always for listening. We love you. From the Long Box Sessions, I'm Alex D'Amino.
And I'm Josh Griffey.
And you're my ride or dies, friends.
I thought you were pointing at me. No, fuck those people.
Well, you're also my ride or die.
Get out my box, all yous.